Welcome to the OoooH breakdown, or OoooH, by CID and Will K. This is out on Repopulate Mars, and been a while since I listened to this one, but I always love CID tracks. Definitely one of my favorites. It's just such a streamlined, tight production producer. Let's dive right in. Here we go. So intro beats, like always, this is unique because it has a little bit more of a wetter vibe than we are used to. Another thing is the unique element of the whoop, right? Those little wub things that just kind of fill out the groove in a unique way. Okay, so just a little bit of an intro lift, dramatically defining an A section and B section for the intro. This just gives, DJs different options to kind of loop different parts, right? If you want to have a more chill section to loop, or if you want to have like a little bigger section to loop. We got a little bit of an entry here into the B section of the intro, right? Because if you have like a 16-bar, 32-bar section, you can always divide it up into an A section and a B section. And so the A section here is pretty chill, right? Right, really fast tops, a lot of energy already. And then here we're going to get a nice open hat lift, so we get a new hat coming in. Really nice, dry, mid-rangey open hat that's just right in the front of the mix. It's a great sounding hat. 909, of course. Okay. Another thing that we're getting is a hint of the bass line. Sounds like maybe there's some kind of like tom or some kind of subtle percussion kind of playing that part. Or maybe even like a kick or something. It sounds like it's some kind of program thing, just playing the rhythm of the bass line, what it sounds like. Okay, a little bit of gravity into the bass drop. Let's listen for if there's going to be what I call an intro hook tease. So one of the things that always pops up, and it's a good thing to do because it's about teasing what your track is all about, is through the intro, right? Intros are for DJs. Just give them beats to loop and stuff. And then as we approach the bass drop, which is where we drop the bass line, right before the bass drop, see if you can put like a little snippet, a little tease of the main hook of the track. So let's see if we get that. Boom, there you go. So now we're getting into the full groove here. Just sounds amazing, dude. I love CID's mixes too. So a little bit of textural stuff in there too. Nothing like too overwhelming. When we get into the bass drop, the main task here is just to introduce the bass line. Let people move, groove, and dance. Teach them how to move, groove, and dance to your track. Don't overwhelm them with hooks on top yet. That's what the hook drops are for, okay? So over here, this is going to be one of the main drops, right? And I call it a hook drop because this is where we can really start putting the hooks over the groove. And so this is one section, then this section right here is another one, right? Hook drop 2. So hook drop 1, hook drop 2. And hook drop 2, of course, is another place where we can really drop the hooks over the groove and give the listener the full experience of the track, the full hook, the full groove, and just fry their brain with excitement, okay? But back here, it's more about just let them learn the groove first. Let them learn how to dance to it. And so here, there's not a lot of crazy hooks going on. It's just a little bit of some interesting textures. And so when we're in the bass drop, just like I mentioned through the intro, we've got an A section and a B section. So with the bass drop, are we going to have an A section and a B section? That's a very typical thing to do. So the first 8 bars are usually just introducing the bass drop, the bass line, and then the second 8 bars, the B section, is going to do a couple things. Number one, you can lift the energy, and so I always ask, what is the B lift, the B section lift of the bass drop? So what's the B lift, if any? Or number two, another thing you could do is transition into the break, okay? And so that is what I'm listening for. So we have a nice bass drop, and now what I want to know is what's going to happen in the second 8 bars, the B section of the bass drop. Are we going to get a lift? Are we going to get a trans that takes us into break 1? Okay, so there's no lift; it just keeps going. We got a nice little. He's dropping the hook again right here at the halfway point, plus that nice big crash that as the entry into the B section. Just giving really exciting spikes, or giving just spikes of excitement at the important parts of the track, so the 8 and the 1. And then as we come in through here, we're starting to get a transition, which for me just sounds like an on-the-nose riser right now, which is totally fine. Obviously it's fine. This track did really well. So in typical CID fashion, one of the ways that he really likes to develop drums and lift drums is to introduce what I call a syncopated snare, okay? And if you listen to or if you watch the breakdown of Sid's track, How We Do, I really go more in depth with this in the beginning of the video. But the way I break down drums is there's 3 parts. Okay, you've got your basic beat, which is the kick, clap, and open hat. You have what I call synco filler, which is basically just filler stuff, right? Like loops, like tops, percussion, blah, blah, blah. But the thing about synco filler, and synco is short for syncopated, but the thing about synco filler is they don't have things that are just popping out of the mix, okay? That's what synco pop is. Synco pop is where you have sounds that pop out of the mix. And again, synco stands for syncopation. And so with the basic beat, just kick, clap, hat, you don't have syncopation. It's just pretty straight. It's like, right? But the synco filler is when you start to introduce a little bit of syncopated elements, a little bit more of a groovy kind of thing, like shakers and stuff. So if we go to the beginning here, there's a lot of synco filler in there, but there's not synco pop because nothing's popping out. It's all just filling things out. We've got the basic beat, we've got the synco filler, but we don't have the pops. Actually, that snare right there, ba-doom, ba-doom, that's a synco pop. See how that pops out? But all the other stuff is just filler. And so those are the 3 things for drums. You've got this, good God, the basic beat, the synco filler, and the synco pop. All right. And so one of the things that Sid likes to do is use synco pops to develop the drums, to lift the drums. And so that's what he's doing here is in the B section of the bass drop, he's introducing a snare that serves as a drum lift, develops the drums a little bit, but also is a synco pop. So that's a very Sid thing to do. So right there at the 4, right there, that's kind of a punk, but cool. I love this. Okay, one of the things I love is when producers, I mean, this is a transition, but when they make really confident, bold transitions, like we're just going from this, like it's a really bold, energetic groove, and we just get this riser, and then we just go right into this vocal. Feel that? Like you don't have any room for your brain to do anything else other than pay attention. We're in the groove, now we have a big vocal taking over our attention. Just big, right? Like I like to really try to simplify the emotions that we're supposed to feel. And one of them is just, if you just have big things happening, it's hard not to pay attention, right? And, I'll just mention, like Chris Lake said that in his lockdown quarantine videos that everybody watched, he said that he likes to mix on a laptop a lot of times. And, I like to do that too, but I was thinking, like, his tracks are so big, the hooks in his tracks are so big that the reason why is if you're producing on a laptop, in order for you to really feel things, they have to be big. you know, and so it's kind of a hack to make sure that you're having these big kind of movements in your track if you work on a laptop. Just an idea to throw at you, right? Rather than having fancy headphones or having fancy speakers, which I have over here on the left, if I just work out right here on the laptop, if I can get the synco, for example, the synco drum to pop, it's going to freaking pop if it pops on the laptop. If I can get that vocal to sound big and explosive and capture my attention here on the laptop when it's on the big screen, you know, quote unquote big screen on the big speakers, then it's going to pop as well, you know. And so just some ideas. So I really like that. Let's get back more on point. Okay, so here we have the intro, then we have the bass drop, doing pretty much on the nose type of things. We drop the bass line in the A section. We then transition in the B section. And then when we get into break one, there's a couple things we want to do. Number one is give them a break, so high pass the drums typically, and we have that, and the drums keep going, which is important at this point because people still need to feel the groove, and you don't want to kill the energy on the dance floor yet. Having the drums go through the break keeps people kind of moving on the dance floor. It doesn't kill the vibe yet. But then the second most important thing to do in a break is introduce something new or different than what's happened before. And so here, obviously, the new thing is that massive vocal. Okay, so three really important things that are happening right here, and they're the only three things that are happening, right? Three checkboxes and only three checkboxes. Number one, high pass on the drums, give them a break. Number two, keep the drums actually going through the break, or at least the groove, high pass the groove. Number three, introduce something new or different. Those are the three and the only three things that are happening at this point. Now, another thing that's important in the breaks is to create a sense of atmosphere. Just open things up. Just open things up, right? We're taking a break. We don't need the intensity of the drop, which is really close. Just open things up. And so that's what's going on here. And that's naturally coming about because you can hear the reverb on the drums and stuff. It's just kind of more of a wet drum sound. And so when that continues, it's kind of already taking care of the atmospheric vibe. Okay, and so we've got, for the break, we've got give them a break. 2, introduce something new or different. 3, the Atmos. 4, another thing I mentioned was keep the groove going here. And then another thing we want to look out for is how are we going to build tension to get into the next section, which is the drop. So let's just pay attention to how that happens. So good, man. I mean, you can imagine, like, I could just hear the mistakes that could be made in this section, but, you know, Sid knows, and, you know, he just knows that, like, the vocal is the hook. So just put the hook front and center. No need to do any nonsense. Just let people listen and sing along with the hook, right? That's enough. Why? Because people are occupied by that. It's going to sound huge when it's just you got those drums playing, just the tops playing, and then you got this just massive vocal taking over everyone's attention, you know? See, that's when I say no. Like, let the melody do the work, right? Okay, so the track is not called Ooh, it's called Oh. Okay, building tension, right? Right here, boom, we're in the second half of the break, and we're getting a snare roll. Okay, 16th note snare roll. Some sounds like some percussion is coming up too, but it's 16th note, so it's speeding things up. Okay, where you can hear the start of a riser. So when you think about the how do you build tension, there's kind of 4 main ways. You've got rep, roll, rise, and grow. So hook repetition, snare roll or kick roll, usually a snare roll. Rise, just any kind of rising feeling, like a riser, or if you're opening up the low pass on a synth. And then rep, roll, rise, and grow is growing the space. So here we have the snare roll and we have the riser going. Let's see if anything else happens. And there we have grow. You can hear the vocals start to go into a space. Now, the important thing about growing the space is that it's pushing the mix further and further back. And so that way when you get into the drop and the drop comes forward in the mix, it just smacks people in the face, you know. And so that's what the point is pushing the mix back, creating that big sense of space, and so that you can go boom and just have that impact into the drop, okay? That depth contrast, that back to front movement. And so we got a lot of growth. We got growing on the snare roll. You can hear the sheen that's created from the reverb on the top of the snare, and the vocal is growing too. Wow, wow. Okay. This is you should also definitely, you're probably going to watch it anyway, but the How We Do video as well. I'm not sure. I think this one came out after How We Do, but Sid is recycling techniques that he used in that track, high-level techniques. Okay, and so what is he doing? Well, I freaked out in the How We Do breakdown because in the main break and build, he didn't do it in the first break. I don't think. No, it was in the second breakdown. At the peak of the build, he went into like a pure grow, which means that it's just reverb. It stops and goes into a reverb, right? At the peak of the build, things get cut off, and then it was just into a reverb. And that's pretty much what's going on here. And then in How We Do, the vocal was way back there in the reverb, and then it just started moving back towards the front of the mix by getting drier. So we have this build, expanding the space, growing the space, boom, it gets cut. And then we just are left with reverb, and the vocal is back there in the reverb, and then it just comes forward and brings us back to the front of the mix for the drop. And that's exactly what's happening here. At the peak of the build, we just get those reverb tails. And the vocal is back there in the reverb too. Okay? But then the vocal plays its part, does its thing, but starts to dry out and get closer to the front of the mix, and that's what helps us make that literal transition. The literal transition I'm talking about, the function of growing, going back in the mix to the front of the mix, that contrast. That could happen immediately, so you can go way back and then boom, explode right away. But here, he's easing us back in. We can literally hear how reverb is creating this this front to back and then back to front movement. Okay, and that's really, really cool because that is one of the really important contrasts to make between the drops and the breaks. The drops are dry, forward, front and center, aggressive. The breaks feel open. They're back in the mix, and we can literally hear how reverb is creating that contrast here. Listen to how things are moving backwards right here, and then listen to how the vocal moves things back forward. Okay, check it out. So good. Okay, cool. So that pretty much takes care of the break. The one last thing I want to mention about the break is PIPO, pattern interrupt payoff, PIPO, pattern interrupt payoff. Everything that we're doing here is we enter into the break. It's just a big vocal, right? The new thing that we're introducing. Then we build tension in the second half, and we build this pattern of tension, right? We're pattern-seeking animals, and that's why when we have that tension pattern, we just expect it to continue. We simultaneously expect it to continue and to stop at some point. And so when we abruptly stop that building pattern, that's called the pattern interrupt. We're interrupting the build pattern. That immediately causes people to freeze in their tracks and pay full attention. You've got their absolute full attention right there. And then that's where you deliver the payoff, which is in this case going to be the vocal. So pattern interrupt, payoff. And it's extremely powerful. And no matter how many times we hear this happen, it will always affect us in the same way. We can't help it. All right? It's just hacking our brain, the way that our brains are designed, or the way our brains have evolved, you know? So, yeah. I mean, aside from just having an incredible groove, right? So we got that. So the next thing is now we're going into the hook drop. Remember what I said before in the bass drop, just introduce the bass. This is not the time to overwhelm the listener with the hooks. That's what the hook drops are for, hence the names, right? Bass drop, drop the bass. Hook drops, drop the hooks. And so that's exactly what we're getting here. I'm surprised I didn't make a breakdown. So this came out in June, March, April, May. Wait, January, February, March, April, May. Yeah, May. I'm surprised I didn't make a video on this, because this is just checking off the boxes in the most direct possible way, right? Or big new thing, big build elements, big pipo, big hook over groove, right? So when we get into the hook drop, here, what the heck am I trying to say? We're getting the most important thing, which is hook over groove. And it just sounds huge. Just not messing around, just frickin' putting the massive hook over the massive groove, and it's so energetic that he has to have that noise blast just on top, just to accent how insane this moment is. Okay, you hear the little snare things that just fill the gap of the vocals. We could talk about punks. We'll leave it for now, but the first thing I noticed is that snare right there just fills the gap of the vocal. The important thing, though, is that it's probably connected to the underlying structure, so we'll come back to that probably. Honestly, the biggest point that I want to make here, instead of that detail about punks, is just the enormous hook over the enormous groove. There's one king checkbox to do in the hook drops, okay? And that is to put a massive hook over a massive groove. And that's exactly what we have here. And it's just in our face. It's huge, right? Okay, cool. Second thing about a hook drop is, this is 32 bars, it looks like. Then we're going to move into what I call a strip. But the second thing about a hook drop is, number one is hooks over groove. Number two is A section, B section. All right? And so when you think about A section, B section, what you want to ask is, what defines the A section? What is the identity of the A section? What defines the B section? What is the identity of the B section? Okay, make that very, very clear. John Summit's La Danza has a beautiful A section, B section. La Candela Viva has a beautiful A section, B section. Sete has a beautiful A section, B section, especially in HD2. And this one is good too. It's just very clean, all right? And so, another thing that I'm thinking about right now is it just cleanly passes the baton, right? So if you imagine like a runner, right? Imagine this is like an 800-meter relay race, 2 laps around the track. Okay, just 2 runners, 2 laps around the track. And the first guy starts running. It's just him. He's just running. It's just the vocal. Okay? Then when he comes back, okay, then he just hands the baton off to the next guy. And this guy now runs for the next 400 meters, I guess. Okay? They're not running together. It's not like the guy hands off the baton and then they start running together. No, he hands off the baton, he's gone. Okay? And so that's the clarity, the cleanliness that I'm talking about with an A section, B section. Okay, you've got a relay race and you're passing off the baton. 2 runners aren't running with the baton at the same time. Now I do want to do a caveat, because a lot of times what happens is when you have the identity, the hook of the A section, you can sprinkle that through the B section. So let's say like there's a little piece of the vocal that we could use to sprinkle in the B section. You know what I mean? But they're not just running together at the same time. I want to give that analogy because it just highlights the clarity of an A section identity versus a B section identity, So the B section here is defined by the vocal texture, which is characteristic CID thing to do with the kind of transient gating effect. That's pretty popular. And again, I talked about that and how we do, because he used that trick there as well. But okay, so we're getting another vocal at the punks. And so what I'll just quickly mention here with punks, because man, I talk about this on almost every single one of these, is punks are just important structural moments. You're just highlighting important structural moments. And so an important structural moment in the drop would obviously be like in an 8-bar section would be the end of the 8-bar section, doing something exciting right there. Another important structural moment would be the 4-bar mark, just doing something there to just give a little spike of excitement. That's what punks are. So if we go back here, so that that happens halfway through. So that's a bit of a what I would call a P4, or a punk that happens at the 4-bar mark. And I call them punks because it's short for punctuation points, because I like to think of these things as almost the grammar of an 8-bar section. You got maybe a period at the end of the 8-bar section. You got maybe a comma in the middle of the 8-bar section. So that's why I call them punks. I think of them as almost punctuation points, or the grammar of an 8-bar section. And so when we're in the B section now, what we're getting, the identity of the B section, is that vocal texture, okay, the gated transient effect. And then we're getting punks with another vocal. So that's what's going on. So that's it. We've got that vocal texture, punks, over groove. Okay, so now we're transitioning out of the drop. I'm imagining this is going to be a strip section. A strip section is where there's 3 core elements of a strip. You've got the kick, the bass, and then the hook on top. You can have other things too, but those are the core elements of a strip drop section. And the stripped drop is important because it gets to the important part of a main break and build, right? So this is going to be the main break and build right here, which is the V taper. So we're going to lower the energy, and then we're going to break the energy down, and then we're going to build the energy back up. Break down, build up, okay? And so the strip drop section, if that's what this is, let's make sure it is. This is where they say, throw it up, dubs on the... Wow, okay. Literally the 3 elements. I don't think there's anything else going on there. Okay, just a little bit of a sprinkle of some vocal stuff, but for the most part, it is kick, it is bass, it is vocal. Okay, the 3 core elements of a strip drop section. So what is the importance of a strip drop? The importance of a strip drop is, again, talking about the V taper of the main break and build. We break the energy down, we build the energy up. Break the energy down, build the energy up. And so the strip drop is one of the first things that we do to break the energy down, to start breaking the energy down. Okay, because we're at a high energy point in the drop, and then what the strip does, by taking away a lot of the drums, the speed, right? Because there's so many 16th notes creating so much speed, that we then step down into the strip drop, which is a step down. Okay, we are breaking down the energy, and when I go like this, it looks like the energy needs to move down in a continuous way, but that's not necessarily the case. It can. So what is something that moves down in a kind of continuous, smooth way? A downshift, right? That gives that nice kind of movement. Another thing that moves it down would be like a low pass. You low pass, or it would be like low passing something down, right? That would be continuous. But you can also step it down in a kind of discrete way, like a stepping down, right? So there's different ways to do it, and that's what a strip does. We're here, then a strip, boom, we're there, and then as you can see right here, we're continuing to step down, boom. Okay, we're taking away the low end, and so 1, 2, 3. Stepping down the energy. All right, and so that's what this is doing here. Yeah, that was a punk right there, P4, that kind of big crazy sound. Adamsville, Bankhead, College Park, Carver Homes, hummus floating on chrome. I'm thinking things are going to pick up here. Like, is there going to be a drum that comes in? So some kind of random percussion just to lift things a little bit. Okay, so here's going to be the next step down. So remember, this is where we are right now in the main break and build. Okay. That's when I say no. This is a great remake of the vocal. I really like it. It sounds really good. Okay, now, we're past the turning point. Okay, the turning, or yeah, is it the turning point? Yeah, the turning point, where we have the turn from the deconstruction to the building up, from building down to building up. So past the turning point. You can accent the turning point. That could be cool. You can have a turning point that steps up. I really like that. But this one's pretty subtle, right? We just get the high pass and we start introducing the things that are going to build the energy up. And so you can hear, I think, the drums. Now you can hear like a vocal texture coming up. Yeah, you can hear the low pass come up on the drums. So there you go, right? We're starting to go up, right? We're starting to move up. That's a low pass on the drums, opening what in what direction? Up. So the question is, what else is going to be doing this? What else is going up? We keep it good, you should know. Getting crunk up in the club, you get low. Can you hear the snare roll? Okay, what the snare? This is the snare roll is doing this. It's building tension. Okay, you can hear the vocals start to grow. What's the grow doing? It's going up. It's building tension. It's expanding the space. So, right, pipo, pattern, interrupt, payoff, things. So kind of a similar trick to what happened before. I think that this one was more impactful for me, but this one's cool because it's just blended a little bit. This one's a little bit more abrupt, so it's more of a kind of wake up thing. This one's a little bit blended where things just really go out smoothly, right? There's not that feeling of abrupt pattern interrupt. But another cool thing about this one is they're using that loop effect on the vocal. I don't know if he did this, but it would have been cool if he like did the loop effect down, so and then when it got to these kicks right here, lining up the on the kicks. Is that what he did? Yeah, it sounds like he did do that. That's cool. I really like that. And then boom. Okay, a little bit of a siren entry. I was not expecting that. I literally thought there was like a siren or something outside. Hooks over groove. All right, give them what they want. So remember, before I was saying like, man, I'm surprised I didn't break this down right away because this is just checking off all the boxes in the most on-the-nose kind of way, right? Unashamed, just maxing out. No need to be subtle. Just dropping all the boxes, just checking them off. And what I want to point out here is the clarity. This is a great example of talking about what I call the HD2 story. Okay, so the HD2 formula is really simple. It's basically what we go through on every single one of these breakdowns because 90% of chop tracks follow the HD2 formula because it is absolutely the most psychologically powerful arrangement structure that you can use to express and develop an idea. Okay, and so let's break down the HD2 formula, then talk about the HD2 story. So the HD2 formula is intro, bass drop, break 1, hook drop 1, main break and build, hook drop 2, outro. Okay, intro, bass drop, break 1, HD1, MBB, HD2, out. Okay, so that's the HD2 formula. The HD2 story, okay, is real simple. It's a 3-act story. Okay, and the story comes from Hollywood. And it's really simple. It's just Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And the way that breaks down is Act 1 is the hook, introduce the hook. Act 2 is build, so build anticipation. Act 3 is payoff. So you pay off that anticipation. You pay off that tension, that drama. So hook, build, payoff. And so that's what's going on here. So HD1 is Act 1 of the story. Okay, this is where we introduce the hook. Act 2 is the main break and build. This is where we introduce the build. Okay, we build tension. And then Act 3 is HD2, which is where we then pay off that tension. All right? And so hook, build, payoff. Right? And this 3-act structure is why the HD2 formula is extremely powerful. And there's another way that I like to break it down. Okay? And it is that HD1, the story that's actually being told, rather than just the labels or terms of hook, build, payoff. The story goes like this. Give them what they want, take it away in some way, and then give it back to them. All right? So give them what they want, take it away in some way, then give it back to them. Okay, that's the HD2 story. And psychologically, the reason why that's so powerful is if you think about like a 2-year-old, you give them a toy and they're happy. I love my toy, right? If you take that away, they start crying. It builds tension. I want my toy back. Right? And then you give it back to them and they're happy. Okay, that's the psychology of the listener. We're not complicated. We don't need to be complicated. We need to understand what we're doing up here. All right? And so in HD1, what is the thing that they want? Give them what they want. Well, what do they want? What's a hook drop? It's a hook over groove. That's what they want. They want hooks over groove. They want to dance and they want to listen to something cool. That's what you got to do. That's your job, right? We want, at the end of the day, as much as we want to be complicated, we're so sophisticated producers. Nah. Simple. Simple. Put a big hook over a big groove. Exactly what's going on here. Okay? That's why before when I was talking about HD1, I was like, man, I really just want to stay on that higher level and just make the point that the big thing that's going on here is just big hook over big groove, giving them what they want. Okay? And then you take that away in some way. What do you take away? Well, the obvious thing to take away is the groove because people stop dancing. Got to give them a break. Simply taking away the groove, just breaking that hook groove connection is ultimately what they want. They want that hook groove connection. So when you break that and take it away in some way, that immediately creates tension. They're the 2-year-old who's crying because you took their toy away. And then what we can do is we can leverage, we can tap into, we can drag that tension out here, okay? Drag it out. And all those tension building elements that we'd like to use, rep, roll, rise, grow, all those things, creating instability, building tension, creating anticipation, is just leveraging that underlying tension that they don't have what they want right now anymore. And when we use that tension to build the tension, we're communicating to them that we're going to give it back to them. We're going to give it back to you. Don't worry, you're going to get it, but I'm going to make you wait for it. And so you can drag that shit out, okay? There's a track right now called By Deeper Purpose, and it's just top of mind for me. I think it's Come and Get Me or something like that. But it's on Club Sweat if you want to look it up. But he's got a minute and a half build. And so that's just a good example of just dragging things out, you know. But the reason why we can't drag it out is because fundamentally we are making a promise to the listener that we are going to deliver on the payoff. We are going to deliver on our promise. And that's what HD2 is, the payoff. We give it back to them. We put the hooks back over the groove. They come back together. There's a couple of dark analogies that come to my mind. this is like, no, I don't want to go there. I was going to say, like, people get married right here, then they break up, and then they get back together and they live happily ever after. But probably a better psychologically thing to think about is addiction, right? So here you're giving someone a hit for the first time of something that they love, right? They're like, oh my God. And then you take it away and they just want it back. They're just like freaking out. Like, I want it back. And then they finally get that next one. And then it's like, right, you're satisfying that tension. And so so another way to think about it is that crave psychology, addiction psychology. Obviously, this is a good way though, right? Because people are escaping, they're having a good time, and blah, blah, blah. But you're leveraging the things that exist inside our brain that create that pattern of craving. All right. And then the HD2 story is give them what they want, take it away in some way, give it back to them, and that's it. And then just go on to the next track, right? And then so you gave them something cool, you took it away to create that tension, you gave it back to them, so now they're happy, and now they're ready to move on. And that's why the HD2 formula is so powerful and effective and just everywhere. I'm going to say ubiquitous, and I actually said it correctly, ubiquitous. But it's because of that simple psychological story. Now you might be wondering, well, what about the beginning part? And the beginning part, like with the bass drop in break 1, this is what I would call setup for the story. You're introducing the characters, but the story hasn't begun yet. So what characters are we introducing? Well, in the bass drop, what are we introducing? You could tell me this right away. We're introducing the groove character. We're introducing the groove character. In the break, what are we introducing? Well, the second most important thing in the break is introducing something new or different, which is usually the main hook. So here we introduce the groove character. The groove character goes away. We introduce the hook character. So we introduce the groove character. Then we introduce the hook character separately, independently. Okay? So we introduce the two big characters, the hook, groove. Remember I said that what do people want? They want the marriage of those two. They want the hook together with the groove. That's what people want. But what we do to set up the story, to set up the HD2 story, we introduce the groove character, goes away. Introduce the hook character. Now they're ready. They're ready for them to come together. And I call that the HD1 equation. Okay? And the HD1 equation, very simply, bass drop plus break 1 equals HD1. Because in HD1, typically, that's where finally the groove from the bass drop comes together with the hook from break 1. Okay? So bass drop plus break 1 equals HD1. That's the HD1 equation. And so this is just set up for the story. You're introducing the groove character, you're introducing the characters, you're introducing the groove character, you're introducing the hook character, and then the story begins, because it's the interaction of those two things that is interesting and that kickstarts the story. So you give them what they want, hooks over groove, you take that away in some way, building that underlying tension, you leverage that tension, you draw it out, you amplify it, and then you give them what they want in HD2. And so and the reason why I really wanted to do a deep dive on this is because this track is a great example of everything there. The HD1 equation, the entire HD2 story. So here we're introducing the groove character, and then we boldly move into the hook character. Can you see that? Groove character, hook character, groove character, hook character. Okay, then in HD1 equation, bass drop BD plus B1, bass drop plus break 1 equals HD1. Now we have hook character playing together with the groove character. Literally couldn't make it more simple than that. You know what I mean? And so when I talk about sometimes the math of a track checking out, this is the math of a track. If you have bass drop plus break 1 equals HD1, you got the HD1 equation. The math checks out. You're doing the things that are important. And the reason why the HD1 is important is because when you introduce the groove character or the characters independently, that creates tension. Okay, so you have the groove character, goes away. You've got the hook character, and the fact that they haven't played together yet builds a kind of subconscious tension that gets released when they finally do come together in HD1. All right, and so that's what this is all about. This tension, you're tapping into the tension that they have not yet come together yet. I've teased the groove, I've teased the hook, but they have not yet come together, and I'm leveraging that underlying tension and building tension so that they finally do come together. And so you get a payoff psychologically of character number one plus and character number two independent. They come together, right? It's almost like, imagine a movie where you have one storyline going, and then you have a second line storyline going. And you know as a viewer that at some point in the movie, they're going to meet, right? I'm sure there's a couple storylines that follow that, but that's the idea, is that when you're watching that, you know they're going to have to meet in some way. You know, they're going to have to meet in some way. And so that's what the HD1 equation is all about. And that's the tension that you're leveraging right here, is they haven't yet come together, and then they finally come together. And the tension that you're leveraging here is that they were together, now they're not together, you want them back together, you leverage that tension, and then boom, you bring them back together here in HD2. And that is the psychological story of the HD2 formula, the entire HD2 formula. Okay, introduce groove character, introduce hook character. They haven't come together yet. Tap into that tension. Boom, release that tension when you bring them back together in HD1. When you bring them together in HD1, the story kicks off. They're together. They're happy. Then boom, they're separated. People are unhappy. They want them to come back together. Come back together, please. And then you tap into that tension, and then they come back together in HD2, and that's the whole story. Okay. And so this is just an absolutely flawless example of that. And one last thing I want to say about this is that in HD2, okay, in HD2 here, where am I going with this? In HD2, a lot of producers want to know, how can I make HD2 different than HD1? And the answer is, you really don't. You really don't. I understand creatively and blah, 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 you know, that you want to do that, but psychologically, just understanding, just give it back to them. You gave them something cool, you took it away, they want to hear it again, all right? And so the underlying hook structure, the underlying structure of hooks over groove should be preserved over here. Otherwise, you're just going to cause confusion. They're like, but that's not what I wanted. This sucks, you know? And so giving it back to them is really important. But there are things that you can do here in HD2 to elevate the HD2 over HD1, to elevate it, to make it feel bigger. But underlying, it's the same thing. You're paying off that desire that they have to have the hooks over groove come back together. But you can elevate it by throwing it right on top, by having more dramatic things happening at the punks or the edits, those kinds of things. You can maybe have more hooks, like call responses in the hooks, just stuff like that. You can throw in like pads, you can throw in strings, you can throw in like synth responses and stuff like that. But fundamentally, you want to make sure you're giving them back what it is they liked in the first place, right? You don't, you know. And so that's pretty much it. It's not so much that this needs to be different. You want to. It doesn't need to be different. It needs to be elevated. So a little bit of a distinction there, okay? Because you want that underlying thing to be the same, but you do, if you want to, you can elevate it in a way. All right. And so now let's go into. Let's check it out. Let's go into HD2, see what happens. Okay, interesting. So he only gave it to us for 8 bars here. In the beginning, it was 16 bars. Sometimes that is flipped, where, like, I think of the track Pax is Into You, or Is It You? Is It You? Pax, Is It You? He gives you the big donk bass for 8 bars in HD1. Then he jams out on the donk bass in HD2 for 16 bars. But this is the reverse case of that, which is interesting. And it seems like what's going on here is that Sid wants to just basically allow the rush to the next song. All right. And so here we're getting the payoff. We're giving them the hooks over the groove, the main hook of the groove. And then we're quickly transitioning down into that vocal transient gating texture. Okay, the vocal punks. And so my question is, what is this section going to do? In my mind, what this next 8-bar section should do is transition somehow into the outro. So here we have 32 bars, and that should be an outro. But let's see what happens. So kind of interesting, because when you do these edits and stuff like that, that kind of preps the listener that something new is going to happen. And here, nothing really new happens. So in my mind, it's a little bit of a letdown as a listener. But at the same time, we're moving to the frickin' outro, so who cares, you know? But when you do have these big edits, it's important to keep in mind that that is signifying, it's signaling to the listener that something new and exciting is going to happen. Otherwise, why do you need to prep them? You know what I mean? What's the point of the edit? You're prepping for a change. So I'm still anticipating, so these are basically the same things with this kind of big edit in between them, but I'm expecting somehow we're going to settle into the outro. Let's see how that happens. Cool, so I like that. That was interesting. You know, a little bit of reverb on the vocal as the transition, and then now we're getting into the outro, and it's just groove. A little bit of a delay on there. Some little punk, some little spot sounds, you know, but nothing too crazy that's going to prohibit a DJ from mixing into the next track. So really breaking down into the groove now. Then breaking down into the beats, right? Giving DJs options. Beats, there you go. Boring outro. Groove beats, groove beats, groove beats. Making it easy for the DJ. The intro and outro are for DJs. They're not for you to be creative, okay? That's what the HD2 story and the setup. This whole the bass drop to the end of HD2. That's where it's fun to be creative. Introduce the groove, introduce the hook character, bring them together in HD1, take them away in the main break and build, bring them back together in HD2. End of story. I should end the video on that, okay? But yeah, I really should, because that's really the biggest takeaway of this is just checking the boxes of the HD2 formula in the most straightforward way possible. And so really want to leave it on that. That is the end of the story. That is the end of the video. If you got any comments or questions, leave them down below. Again, I love this stuff, so I'd love to hear what you think about it. And I'll see you in the next breakdown. Peace.